with your host, Donnie Miller, connecting our community with information about issues and opportunities.
Good Sunday morning and welcome to Bridges. I'm so glad to have you here today. We're talking about a subject that is absolutely critical to the development of strong families, strong children, strong communities. We're talking about the importance of fathers. We are talking today with several people who are actually experts in this field, and I'd like to introduce them to you right this moment. We have with us Catherine Tijerina, who is the co-founder of the Ridge Project, along with her husband, Ron Tijerina, and their son, Brandon. And all the way from Washington, D.C., joining us by Skype is Eugene Snaberg. Mr. Snaberg is the director of the Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships. Welcome, Mr. Snaberg. We're glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
We're going to get started here, and please, if as you're joining us from DC, join the conversation at any point that you feel appropriate to comment. But I want to put some focus to this issue. First of all, let's talk a little bit about the Ridge Project, exactly what the Ridge Project is, and then how the Fatherhood Initiative developed from that.
Sure. Well, it all began basically in 1991, finding ourselves in a predicament that we had no idea was going to take us. I found myself going to prison and married 5 years with 2 sons and not even understanding what it meant to be, let alone a husband, a father, or a man of his word.
Right.
So
as Ron went to prison for 14 to 25 years.
14 to 25 years.
Yeah, and he did 15 years.
for a crime I didn't commit.
Right. But, I mean, that was little comfort that he went to prison for something he didn't do. What I found was, growing up, I had, my dad was in the house, and my dad was very present. And I saw, you know, my sons really lacking that presence. And so I just, as we navigated through the time together in our relationship, it became very, very important to me to make sure that my sons had that connection with their dad. I wanted them to have that anchor. Because I had known so many people that had not had a father in their life and not had that positive role model. And I had seen the effects of that. And I knew that's not what I wanted for my kids.
So Kathy coming to visit me all these years, bringing Blake and Brandon to I mean, the best we could do in a visiting room, you know, we're only giving so much time. We're talking about less than 3 hours to instill something in a young man's life, and in this case, both my boys, when I yet myself needed something to be instilled in me.
And you, absolutely.
To grow up.
So what kept you all together?
I mean, pretty much my mom was the main driving force of doing that, because I know my brother and I both wanted to stop going to see my dad because it was just super painful because we always had to leave. And I mean, there was really no physical contact. And, but I mean, it was the phone calls, the letters that we got that really encouraged my brother and I, that like it let us know that my dad wanted to be part of our lives, even though he couldn't physically be there. He was still there, like spiritually, I guess,
Right.
in a sense.
Yeah. I want to get back to this. I think this is a fascinating story, and I so thank you for joining us this morning and being willing to talk about that. But I'd like to get Mr. Snaberg into the conversation because, as I understand it, sir, it was your idea to bring this whole fatherhood initiative to Toledo.
Well, Donnie, thank you so much for having us. And you know, this issue of responsible fatherhood is a real priority for President Obama. Many of your viewers know that President Obama was raised without his father, and ever since he's been an elected official, both in Illinois and now as the President of the United States, he's taken that opportunity to lift up this issue. And so he launched the President's Fatherhood and Mentoring Initiative in 2009. And one of the elements of the President's Initiative is going around the country hosting local fatherhood heroes roundtables, where we lift up and recognize everyday dads and moms who support responsible fatherhood. And we're so excited to be coming to Toledo on May 3rd to recognize a group of men and women who recognize the critically important role that fathers play in strengthening families. And we're so excited to partner with Ron and Kathy and the Ridge Project, Hope for Toledo, and the city of Toledo.
You know, we're going to talk a little bit more about that particular event as we move through the program, but can you tell me just a bit, Eugene, what the goals, the overall goals of the initiative are? What is it that you hope to accomplish through this initiative?
Sure. Well, we know from research that when children grow up without their biological father or without a healthy male role model in their life, that they're much more at risk for risky behaviors, delinquency, teen pregnancy, suicide, a whole host of negative indicators. And so to that end, the president has really urged federal agencies in the administration to step up their efforts for the sake of children and for the sake of families and communities. And so at the Department of Health and Human Services, we've increased funding for fatherhood grants, and the RIDGE Project is one of our grantees. And so we increased that by $25 million annually to now where it is today at $75 million. For instance, at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, we're working with public housing authorities, over 3,000 of them throughout the country, to support and prioritize the participation of fathers in the lives of their children. And here at the Department of Justice, we're funding through our Second Chance grants efforts to support those coming home from incarceration to successfully gain employment, housing, with a particular focus on those who have children, to strengthen families and strengthen communities.
Thank you so much. Ron, Kathy, Brandon, do you see real evidence from your initiative of change? Do you see, does it work?
It
does work.
It is phenomenal. It's nothing short than a miracle every day that we get to impart principles, key principles in not only a father's life, but watching those principles as he activates them in his life, how the ripple effect takes place to watching mom and dad actually start to have a healthy relationship among each other.
Even if they're no longer together. I mean, the transformation that we're seeing in relationships and in families is nothing short of miraculous.
Well, I'm really glad you said that, because one of the questions that I was going to ask is whether you think this trend that we see these days toward women deciding to have babies on their own, and there are lots of reasons, especially for women of color, to make the decision to have babies on their own. Black and brown men are less available to women of color. You know from your experience that the prisons are predominantly filled with people who are black or who are brown. In fact, on your website, there's a statistic that says that more than 1.7 million children in the U.S. have an incarcerated parent, and more than 7.5 million children have parents in the judicial system. Those are typically males in the system. So do you think this trend toward women having and trying to raise kids without their dads is detrimental?
Well, I think it is.
I think it is.
Do you?
And and the reason being is, the reason why any man would find himself in prison, and I really firmly believe this. This is my opinion, and this is the ground I stand on. Any dad who finds himself in prison is because he's selfish. Bottom line. The type of people that go to hospitals are sick people. Healthy people don't go to hospitals. If a dad or any man finds himself in prison, it's because he's sick, because it's about him and him alone. Healthy fathers don't go to prison. Healthy fathers are taking care of their business, taking care of their family. Even if mom and dad, for whatever reason, they just couldn't see eye to eye, and so they decide to separate, dad is still going to be dad and manifest those principles of what it means to be a father. I look at my sons and I see the success that they're having, and I'm so thankful that Kathy was brave enough to not only endure but to go through this, to bring my boys in the 7 prisons that I was in.
7 prisons in 15 years.
In 15 years, I was 7 different prisons, and I'm one of the fortunate ones where my family would come to visit me not only once but up to 3 times a month, and then the strong support units that would surround my family to help anchor and sustain Kathy and the boys, to where as they were going through this type of trial and tribulation, they could come out not unscathed, because the scars are there, but the healing is also there, and the scars are there to remind us that we overcame something great. And that we can help others. Look, if we can do it,
anybody, others can do it. Others can do it.
We can do it.
As the son in all of this process, other than the profound sadness you had for having to leave your dad when you went to visit him, were there other impacts? Were there additional impacts on your life for having your dad in prison?
Yeah, I mean, I was only 2 when my dad went to prison, and so.
How old is your older brother, Blake?
He
is older or younger?
25 or 26.
26.
So he's older.
Yeah, he's older than I am.
Okay.
And he has 2 kids and a wife.
So they were 2 and 4 when Ron first went to prison.
2 and 4,
yeah.
okay.
And so when he went to prison, I really didn't have any understanding. I don't really have a memory of him before that. But it wasn't until I was like 8 years old until I realized like that prison was a bad thing, and if you had a parent in prison, then you were looked at as the problem by default. And I remember talking to some friends, and they would always ask me, like, or I guess they asked me, so you're always leaving like 2 or 3 times a month on the weekends, on Saturdays or Fridays. Where are you going? And I'm like, well, I'm going to visit my dad. And they're like, oh, where's your dad at? And they probably thought like they were divorced,
working
and
out
then
of town
yeah,
or something.
Yeah. So they're like, oh, where's your dad? And I was like, well, he's in prison. They were like, oh, you're that kid.
Oh, yeah.
And so they kind of would like separate themselves from me because I was statistically supposed to start doing drugs and end up in prison just like my dad. Yeah.
Absolutely. So. Eugene, are you there? You with us?
I'm still there.
Given the pushback that the president must get for investing in guys and young women who are often stigmatized as being not worth it, they're going to be bad forever, he's pretty insistent that funds be spent on initiatives like the Fatherhood Initiative. How does he manage that pushback? How does he respond to that pushback?
Well, you know, Donnie, this issue of responsible fatherhood is actually one where there's a great deal of common ground, both on the left and the right. There's real agreement that the best parent is 2 parents. And in fact, when you're talking about investments, when you're investing in young people, when you're investing in families, you're going to save considerable amounts of funds on the back end in terms of incarceration and other types of public dollars that would need to be expended. So, you know, we feel like it's a good investment to make these investments in strengthening fathers, strengthening marriages, strengthening children and communities.
Thank you. I think at that point, at this particular point, we're going to go to break because I want to ask you some questions about what Eugene has just said to us that will take a few minutes to get into. So we're going to go to break, okay? You'll stay with us while we're away?
Oh, absolutely.
All righty. We're going to go away for just a second, but I promise you we will be right back. Go nowhere.